The draft lottery just concluded for the NBA. I'm not very happy about it. No, I'm actually happy with it. I like how it turned out for us, but we got some things to talk about because you might think, oh, well, this is a great thing. The results that you guys jumped up 2 spots from where you're projected. Wrong! I'm going to explain that here in a second. Alright, so let's break it down. I actually already have done a video that was, I think, like 20 games before the end of the season. That was the absolute state of the Portland Trailblazers. That's what I called it. Go back and listen to that if you want to catch up on the situation that the team is in, because it's in a absolutely horrible position long term. The reason why getting the third pick was not actually as good as you might assume it to be, especially for this team, is because of the fact that, let's face it, no, though normally, especially this deep of a draft, it's a fantastic thing, it's not going to help this team long term. And in fact, if anything, this kind of hurts the team because we pretty much were wedging on the #1 pick. And there's more incentive now to actually instead, again, go into full-on rebuild. There's no reason to keep putting it off. We've been doing it for like 3 years now. We need to finally fucking have a competent enough ownership group and thus front office to say, we're done trying to fucking put Play-Doh inside of a cracked ship hull. Let's finally take the ship in for repair, and because it's old enough, let's rebuild the thing instead. Let's have a new one built. And so that's what basically we need to do, because we're just trying to put slime or Play-Doh into a leak, and it keeps getting bigger, and then we're like, well, what could keep causing that? Can't imagine. Maybe your own stupid choices and neglecting your responsibilities as a freaking team in front office. It's actually highly incentivized now that we got the third pick because of its value, especially in this draft. Its value is extremely high. And so as a result, I mean, higher than most drafts. So as a result, that finally gives us another even more valuable asset and tool to use in trades. And again, I touched on this in that other video prior. The only thing we can really do at this point as a team that actually makes sense and would actually move the needle at all is, again, the rebuild, in the sense of we're stuck trading Ant and Dame. Those are really the only 2 players that have a very high level of value. And that's not just contractually, that's literally across the league. They have incredible value. So every team would love to be able to have a Damian Lillard and an Anthony Simons on their team. And Anthony is incredibly overrated. He is so painfully overvalued by general managers and other front office staff, scouts, coaches, current and former players, analysts, media staff, and fans alike. If he remains on the Blazers, there's no fucking way he's going to advance his skills at all, especially defensively, which is where he desperately needs the most work. Because if you look at the track record for this team, it's verifiable via the progress that our players have made, especially when they have such supposedly incredibly high motors, potentials, and ethics. Where the is their skills? Where the hell is their advancement, especially defensively? It simply doesn't exist, because it seems like this team literally does not have a defensive specialist on their development staff. Immense problem, especially, again, if you really want to keep Ant. He has to have that as his #1 priority, because he came in already extremely athletic and very, very versatile offensively. He's not just a shooter, he is genuinely a scorer. He already has grown a lot of confidence in terms of drives and traffic, which is I'm thankful for, because he has the ability to pack it on people if he wants to too. He hasn't quite got there yet, but he was trying to avoid driving last year. This season, fortunately, he was a lot more aggressive and grew a lot more confident doing it, so he did it more often. It still wasn't, to me, enough at all, but he, the point is, he doesn't have much more to go offensively. He didn't really when he came in. He certainly doesn't now. And if you look again at the team's track record offensively with offensively gifted players, the only thing that seems to ever improve with them on this team is ball handling, and that's it. Everything else kind of goes out the window because they already had that high level of offensive skill, and so they remain extremely streaky. All the more reason to get rid of Ant while we can, especially if you can get him to a team where he can fulfill that potential, because he does have the right kind of staff around him that are going to not only encourage him, but make sure he works on the weakest parts of his game, which clearly is never going to happen here if we keep him. Plus, he's extremely expensive, and for the small market that we are, you're not going to really do well with being able to afford to keep him. So, if anything, in my opinion, I would say actually the worst player we have on the roster to build around. If we try to go into a rebuild, get rid of him, because he's the worst case scenario. If we try to build around him and keep him and trade everyone else, we're going to be rebuilding for a lot longer, and we're not going to be able to be as successful as we could be if we traded him too, because his contract and the value that, like I said, literally from GMs all the way down through fans, everybody in between, overvalues the fuck out of the guy. So he's at the peak of his value right now, and we need to exploit that in a trade before it eventually creeps down and starts going down to plateau and level out where he actually probably has that reputation to belong. So if anything, we need to trade him. He's the first one along with Dame we need to trade. And then obviously we need to somehow try to figure out how the heck to convince a team to take on Jusuf Nurkic and his contract. I love Jusuf Nurkic. He has had and has incredible potential, but he's now so fragile. He's not as fragile as Autumn Leaf Collins. You know who you are. But even when he's actually on a roll, including physically, where he's at closer to peak health and he's not actually as prone as he normally is, and he's able to play 30 games straight, if that even happens these days, it seems like he can, except I don't know if he even did this season. Either way, we know from history he can get on a roll, and he can literally be a guy who could average 20 plus points and 14, 15 rebounds a game if he wanted to, along with like 2+ blocks a game, a steal a game, and like 3.5 to 6 assists a game, if he wanted to. But he checked out mentally. Season before last, I think it was, or maybe it was last season. I think it was season before last, but it might have been last season. He completely mentally checked out from this team. He even said before I guess it was last season, because he resigned last offseason. So he even said before he resigned that he didn't know if he wanted to be here, and you could tell he really meant it. And his biggest complaint, as we all know, is he didn't have enough touches in his opinion. He was not a big enough part of the offense. This is the only team, I guarantee, that was offering him as big of a fucking contract and as long a contract as he got. So I guarantee that's why he stayed here. This season, he was in and out mentally. You could tell he was half checked in sometimes. He was not checked in other games. And in some games, he was fully checked in for like 3 quarters. And then he'd check out halfway or all the way, like by the 4th quarter for whatever reason. So he had some good games this year. But again, he's too erratic. You never know anymore what the hell you're going to get out of him game to game, day to day. And even what his mentality is going to be. All the more reason to try to get rid of him as well in the trade, especially considering, again, he's so expensive. The problem is that, again, I don't think you'd have to be incredibly good salesman and incredibly persuasive to be able to convince a logical and intelligent general manager to take on his contract and his injury liabilities and everything, and his mental liabilities even, on your team. Because you can't really have him off the bench. That's going to make him more mentally checked out, even probably more upset. So that's not going to work. Plus, he's kind of a starting center anyway. Like, by default, he's probably best as a starter. I think he would hurt the team more, even if he didn't take a mental hit and, get worse in attitude if he was taking a bench seat. He puts you in a really rough and tough position as a team and as a coach. And as a general manager, what do you do with him and his massively bloated contract that's no longer probably really, let's face it, anywhere near what he's worth? But the point is, as long-winded as this is, that's the problems with him. So we got to somehow figure out how the heck to convince a team to take him on. And the only way I can see that happening is if we bundle him with Dame or with Ant. I don't know. I don't think any team's going to be. I was literally about to say instinctively, so it's literally natural to me, dumb enough to trade him 1-for-1. I just don't think. As much as it hurts me to say, because again, I really like Nurk, you have to be a dumbass in order to take on his contract in a 1-for-1 trade. I'm sorry, it's true. I want to point this out right now while I'm thinking of it, because it's very important contextually. The original reason why we traded both Nopo and CJ was because they were equivalently together. Their contracts were worth $180 million. And this team wanted everything, no matter what it caused or how bad it hurt the team. They wanted to be underneath the luxury tax. And so as a result, that's why they traded them. Because if we kept them on through this last offseason, the team would have been forced to pay some fairly high luxury tax margin. I can't remember how high it was. So as a result, they wanted to get under the luxury tax before the deadline that the league had set for them, in order to not have to pay the luxury tax. They wanted to do that at all costs. And the best way to do that was to get rid of $180 million of contract, which of course was CJ McCollum and Nopo. Because we re-signed Nopo for 4 years, $80 million, I believe. And then what was left on his contract was 3 years, $100 million. So as a result, we traded those guys away because we wanted to get under the luxury tax at all costs, and so we did. And then, not that long after, we go into the offseason, and what do they do in free agency? They re-sign Nurk for $80 million, and Ant for $100 million. You know, the exact amount they just traded away so that they get under the luxury tax. They just re-signed. So in what universe did that make sense? And then who did we sign or we'll trade for in the offseason? It was Jerami Grant. He's an unrestricted free agent right now. So, if we wanted to keep him, if we wanted to say, oh, well, the third pick's great, because this team is so fucking delusional. This team is so incompetently ran that I guarantee they're going to look at the third pick and go, oh, well, we're on top of the fucking world. No, you're fucking not. But that's exactly how this team thinks and operates. They're like, okay, well, then in that case, we need to double down because we're definitely moving the needle way towards a championship contending team this year. Got them. And so they're going to take and draft somebody with the third pick that probably doesn't actually help us, especially immediately. And then what? Because then we have Dame, who we're going to try our best not to have him to the point where he decides, I want to be traded. So you're going to try to convince him to stay, as if this is great. We still have Nurk. Nobody's going to want to take on his contract, especially, again, like 1-for-1, so alone. Ant's there, and they're obviously going to want to rebuild around Ant, so they're going to keep Ant as the future centerpiece, which is, I think, a horrific idea for so many reasons. He's one of the worst defenders statistically in the league. He's painfully streaky. So basically, he's just a more athletic CJ McCollum. Let's face it, that's all he is. I've said this before, and I will die on that hill. He is literally all he is a younger, more athletic CJ McCollum. That's what Ant is. He's nothing else. He's absolutely useless, in my opinion, to this team. But anyway, so they're going to go that direction with that, which means now you have those guys still locked up, and they're going to try to do everything to keep them. Being delusional enough to think this is enough to be able to move the needle with our third pick. And Shaden Sharp, obviously, and Trendon and his progress. I love fucking my main man, Tendon. I love Transom Waterford. He is, by the way, that's a good lowbrow joke. If you don't understand the humor in that, drown yourself. Those two, they're gonna really want to focus on. Who knows? They might overvalue Jabari. Jabari showed great potential, but I think he's definitely a project player. He seems like a guy who's gonna need a lot of time, probably 3-4 years before he even reaches a consistent level enough to be able to match where Trendon is now. So then you have all those guys locked up. So you're not going to trade those guys. So now you have to go all in. And so then they're going to potentially, if they decide to throw everything they said about the luxury tax out the fucking window, then they might decide, okay, we're going to re-sign Jerami Grant now. Cool, but he's had the best fucking season of his entire career. which means, and also he's 28, going on 29. You know, the entry into the prime years. So as a result, this is the one in single time guaranteed in his entire career that he can make as much money as possible. Have the biggest, juiciest contract as possible. That's why almost everybody, when they reach that age, plays at that level. The level they have not reached yet until that year. Because it's their contract year, they're hitting 28, 27, 29, and they just had the best season of their career. And the reason why they did is because they know this is the one and only chance that they will probably have at any point in their career to be able to make as much money on one single contract as possible. And I guarantee Jeremiah is going to emphasize money over staying in his hometown in Portland, let alone thus with a hometown team. I just don't see him staying here at all. And no matter how hard this team tries, I'm sure because we had him now for a full season, we probably have bird rights on him. I think that's how that works. So we technically could pay him the most out of anybody. Yes, this team is entirely incompetent, but do I think that they're that fucking brainless that they would actually offer him a fucking max contract to JG? No, I don't think so. He's not a young wing, athletic wing with potential. You know, the only players that this team ever signs. If you haven't noticed, we always have never enough front court depth. It just doesn't exist. And we have other athletic wing players that are young with potential trying to play power forward and sometimes center, because all we sign are shooting guards and small forwards. So no, I don't think, not only are they stupid enough, I don't think they're willing to resign him for a max or anywhere close to max, because luxury tax thing, if they're truly committed to it, they're already probably going to go into it again, because they literally just recouped the same exact cost that they got rid of to get under it. They just came back as covered. But even if they don't have to pay him a full max in the highest amount possible, they are able to somehow bring him back for 120 million 4 years, 130, 140 million 4 years. They're so far into luxury tax at that point, it's unreasonable. And plus, again, I guarantee this doesn't move the needle for this team, if at all. If it does, it's very slight. But the bar is set so fucking low for the Blazers at this point, in terms of that they set for themselves, mind you, the last 2-3 seasons, that, and that's especially record-wise, but not just that I would not be surprised if they consider it a success if they did all of that, and for whatever reason, we won 4 or 5 more games, and they're like, it was a massive success. Stay with the team. Do not demand a trade. We made progress. No, you didn't. You threw yourself off a cliff 2 seasons ago so that you could improve by 3 to 6 games each season so you could claim progress. That's not progress. That's being a fucking suicidal idiot. Sorry. Try again next season. Like, this is the true situation we're in, because see, that's the crux of the fucking problem with the Jerami Grant contract situation. He's an unrestricted free agent. He's gonna want, and I guarantee he's gonna walk for as much money as possible, and this team is in absolute zero position to try to free user bird rights to re-sign him for guaranteed 4 years, God knows how much money. I would love to see us in this offseason be competent for once and decide to finally blow up the team. Like I said, with this draft lottery results, it's the best possible time. It's the best affirmation, proof of why the Portland Trail Blazers need to trade everybody. They need to frickin' rebuild. Period. End of story. Full stop. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you say for that. We need to do that. We've been needing to do it for at least 2 straight seasons now, if not 3. and we just refuse to do it because we like to pretend that everybody in this team is Neil Olshey. And we just want to keep repeating the same thing over and 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 over again, and live in complete delusion thinking that this time it's different. I mean, it's not. It's just different names and faces doing the same thing, filling the same gaps at the same level, because we keep smashing our heads into the same exact piece of the brick wall, because that's apparently the Portland Trailblazers in a nutshell. I just want to see this team blow it up. I need to see the team die. Instead of trying to improve, but never taking responsibility for repeating the same exact actions and choices every single off-season, finally take responsibility, and instead of half-suiciding, just full-on suicide. Rebirth and truly start from scratch. This pick is now way more valuable than it even was at the 5th, and it was way more valuable than a normal 5th pick this draft. This is why it desperately needs to be now that we commit to a full rebuild. Dame's not that happy. Nurk's mentally checked out. Ant is not as good as we all claim he is. We already have Shea. He now has a season under his belt. We have Transom, Waterford. It's enough to build around those guys. And then we can actually literally blow it up, trade everybody away, including that 3rd pick, for the future, looking long term, and have Shea and Transom, Waterford to build around. And maybe if you could somehow fandangle it and not prevent yourself from bringing in enough future value, especially like picks and stuff, then either Keon or Nas. I'm not sure how many people, including Blazers fans, see the incredible value and impact that Transom Waterford already has. Yes, I keep calling him Transom Waterford, and I will sink with this ship. Proudly. Thank you. My father is the Jolly Roger. My last name is Grog, so actually this joke has been pirated. I need to stop. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get to is that it kind of incessantly repeated by using multiple examples. This is the perfect fucking time to blow it to pieces and finally commit to a true rebuild. Please make it fucking stop the torture of the same shit over and over and over again. It's been 10 straight years of the same fucking shit every fucking year. Season and off season. I am so expensive of it. It's so fucking irritating, dude. Just become competent, please. God. And rebuild the fucking team. You just got an extremely valuable, way more than normal, 3rd pick to bundle with Nurk, Ant, Nas, Dame, you name it. We have Shea. He has a season under his belt. The best fucking player to be around, build around. Even if we just only had one young guy to build around that we kept, it obviously nobody's going to question. It would have to be Shaden Sharp. It has to be Shea. There's no fucking question about that. So even if you only keep one player, just keep Shea. Build around him. Commit permanently to the guy to build around him. And if you have to get rid of everyone, literally everyone else, in order to stockpile as many picks and as much future value as possible. And not just as many picks, because it would be smart, especially with the recent crops of young guys, to potentially trade for some younger guys with some experience from recent drafts to also try to develop and potentially build around. Now, I will point this out. It is obvious and blatantly clear. Make it very, very clear. My name is Bonnie Santos. Now let me make it very clear. Obviously, it's not enough to simply blow up and rebuild the roster, because obviously, for for 10 straight seasons, the same mistakes have been constantly repeated, and nobody's been willing to take ownership. Not even ownership of the team has been willing to take ownership for allowing this to consistently happen, and probably even having a hand in it, even while, admittedly, Paul Allen was alive and still owning and running the team. You have to, at the very least, finally get some genuinely competent, skilled, tactic-based, methodical, thorough, adaptable front office staff. You have to do that. And you have to finally diversify the fuck out of your development staff and get some competent, incredibly skilled, with history to prove they actually know what they're doing and they're actually good at doing it, to have diversity in the skills you're going to help your players develop with your development staff. And, for the love of God, get rid of fucking Jeff and Jessica Cohen. Just get rid of Jessica and Jeff. Get rid of them and their entire fucking medical staff, the training staff team. Get rid of them. Fire them. Let's finally be washed and done with these guys. Because, and this is a fact, Jeff has been with the Blazers as either the lead or the second lead, whatever you want to call that. So like the equivalent to a vice president of training operations, let's call it, medical operations for the team. He has been here for 13 seasons. This last season was his 13th season. Literally, the guy's been here for 13 years. At least. Jessica Cohen has been here for at least 9 to 10 years. They and their team have been here for a fucking long time. And I know that somebody on Twitter, like last year, maybe it was this year, I think it was last year, when I mentioned that, had demanded that that was untrue because there's apparently some website, I don't know if it's like a web page on NBA.com or something, but there's apparently some website where you can go and look at staff for each team, and not just see who they are, but specifically see their contracts, how much they're for, and how long they've been signed, and when they were signed. And it shows that supposedly they were brought in 2016, I think they showed, or something like that. Or it was either 2016 or it was like 2019. I can't remember which one. But it was relatively recently. And so they're like, it clearly says that this was when they were first signed to the team. And it's like, okay, well, I can guarantee that website is very misleading. I don't think it's intentionally misleading by any means. But I just about guarantee to you, and I can bet you, and I can swear on my life that I bet I'm right here, is that it does not mean that that was the very first time they signed a contract with that team, or that that was when they were new to the team. It could also, and it very likely therefore does, also include re-signing. But I know for a fact I've been there. If you look at old footage of Blazers games from 2010-11 season, you will see none other than Jeff on the bench. And he is, once again, the lead trainer. Back then he was. So, again, now it's Jessica. And if you look back far enough, you'll notice that Jess has been here for a really fucking long time too. And then, think about their tenure with this team. Especially for the entire time Jeff's been here, which is 13 straight seasons. Look at this. Look at the history of this team with injuries. Look at our track record. And not just look at the injuries themselves, noting how many are minor, moderate, severe, career-ending, but look at the ones in chronic, obviously, which means consistent or recurring. They don't seem to be able to be cured or go away. But, and thus the total amount of injuries total. But look at the duration that they were out and that they needed to heal. And then compare that with the rest of the league. And then do the same thing with how long it took before they had to go out with an injury again. Keep looking at that. Because I guarantee when you do direct... I don't know who has the time to do that. I know there's obviously plenty of you out there who do that. Because there's tons of stat freaks out there, stat heads out there. So Whoever knows somebody like there like that and or is one, I would highly encourage you to do that, because I would love to be able to see that myself, and I would love for everyone else to be able to see that out there as well. It's invaluable information. I guarantee that this team will have by far the worst training staff for these last 13 straight years, with the most injuries, especially the most chronic, severe, and career endings, and the most repetitive, therefore, as well as the longest durations needed to be out and the shortest durations of time between subsequent injuries. Guarantee it. We are the worst. Fire the fucking training staff. That has to happen too. Basically, the entire team, staff-wise, top to bottom, including the ownership, has to fucking go, because the ownership's just as incompetent as everyone else. We desperately need to do that too. So in order to do a true proper rebuild of this team, you cannot do the typical just simply the roster rebuild. You have to rebuild the literal entire team from the top down. You can't keep anybody. And it's ironic because the team already fired the longtime TV production crews. Jeff Curtin was fired. I can't remember the other 2-3 people that have been here forever. Longer than I've actually been watching basketball, because I actually got started really fucking late with that. Like 2008-9 was the earliest they started watching NBA a little bit, and then I really started watching 2010-11 and on from there. So I was sort of really late. But even before then, I know that Jeff Curtin and these other people were here with this team since then. And they've already wiped them off the floor. They got rid of them this offseason. And co-owner with Jody, he was the guy apparently demanding of it and behind it. And so he wiped them off the face of the earth. The point being is that they're already doing that to cost save, to obviously to cut corners and save a lot of money. So as a result, it's already all the more reason and perfect timing to do that kind of a rebuild where you're completely going from top down. Just say fuck off. Also, remember, the new CBA and TV deals were officially agreed to this season. Meaning that at the start of this coming season, they go and kick into gear. Meaning that it's also the perfect time for the team to be sold. Because supposedly, season before last, when Phil Knight originally, or maybe it was last offseason, but either way, when Phil Knight and the co-owner, is it of the Padres or is it the Dodgers? I can't remember. One of the California MLB teams that he co-owns with this other guy. When they offered to buy the Portland Trail Blazers last offseason, I think it was, and Jody pretty much laughed it off, and the team said, we're not up for sale at this moment in time, blah, 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 whatever. Well, one, they loved that, because that's huge publicity, and then they have now a bar set, and so do all other potential buyers, have a bar set for how much roughly people are probably going to be looking to pay, and that's probably the minimum level. When they did that, the claim from just about everybody, including fans, was the reason why she wasn't willing to sell the team, even though it was the perfect time to do it, was because her and anyone else that was looking to sell their teams were waiting for the new CBA and TV deal to kick into gear, be agreed upon, and start. Well, that means that this offseason is the time to prove that that's really what you were waiting for and that you were really going to sell the team after that happened. Because now they potentially get more money in their sales. I don't feel like the Blazers, at least, are going to be able to get much more money than they would have before the TV deal. Because they're like, oh, well, the CBA and the TV deal will guarantee like a few $100 million at least more dollars value to every team. I don't actually agree with that in the slightest. The main reason why is, again, because this team has been backpedaling, and it's been ran very, very painfully incompetently now for 3-4 seasons, at least, straight. And again, 10 years straight of repeating the same mistakes over and over, and nobody ever takes ownership for the fucking mistakes. And that's going to start with the ownership especially. So as a result, that and the getting extremely frustrated fans and desperately needing a rebuild where there's no way in hell, heaven or high water, this team is going to avoid a rebuild. At some point, again, at least roster-wise, at some point, this team, within the next 2 to 3 seasons max, is going to be forced to enter into a true, proper roster rebuild. That probably doesn't help the value of the team at all, knowing that when you inherit the team, you're probably the ones that are going to be responsible for blowing it up and doing the rebuild. And that's not necessarily great for sales and those profits after you just spent a few $billion on a team, knowing that you're going to lose a bunch for a handful of years before you finally get to a point where you've rebuilt enough that, hey, now you're actually doing good enough that you're actually contending. So waiting would probably hurt the value even more, but I think that that's why, with the Blazers at least, this team, there's no way at all, I believe, that they're going to have any more value than they had before. If anything, I think it's probably plateaued with the offer from Phil Knight last offseason. That was a peak this team's going to get, and from here, the longer they wait, the more it's probably going to slowly decline. So they really need to get on the ball and recognize what's happening here and be like, this literally could not be a more impeccable time to do a sale of the team and a complete rebuild of the team. Especially considering it'll give you, I would think and imagine, it probably gives a more realistic expectation of the value of your team when you get rid of your superstars, your stars, and your potential stars and blow up your roster to rebuild. If you go and you scrap almost all your roster, right, before you sell the team, because it's already inevitable you're going to, like I said, 2-3 seasons down the road, you will be forced to rebuild anyway. You might as well blow it up now and then sell the team after you've blown it up, but before you actually properly start a rebuild. But you gave the team a good, decent, if not great foundation to then start with for the new ownership and thus potentially hopefully new front office staff to start off with and rebuild from and build off of, including maybe building up even more assets for the future. So I would think as a result, that's what you'd probably business-wise be best to do this offseason, and know that you're going to do that with the intent to sell. So behind closed doors, the business with the league and with potential buyers, well, they're already lining up because you're already basically indicating, yeah, we're selling this offseason. But that's behind closed doors. So the public, we the public, in the media and stuff, aren't necessarily going to catch wind of it and know about it. But they would. And so as a result, you would then blow up the team so that you can start the rebuild process for the new owners. And then by the start of the next season, you have the new owners fully owning and controlling the team. Hopefully you have the new staff and everything. And obviously they would be responsible for redoing the staff from top to bottom as well. So again, if you think about it, that makes perfect timing sense as well for a sale this offseason of this team. And it desperately needs to happen. I've seen it trend into tens of thousands of tweets. Sell the team, Jody. Hashtag sell the team, Jody. Longest-winded way to say, once again, may I reiterate, as I have many times throughout this video, it is more than high time to sell this team. It is more than high time to do a true, genuine rebuild. And it is required, once again, it's important to remember this, it is absolutely required that when we blow the team up and try to do a roster rebuild, we have to have new owners, we have to have new front office, we have to have new training staff, we have to have new development staff, everybody, probably even new coaching staff. And then that way, especially if you do everybody, and they're all gone, and most of the media team's gone now, it's like, okay, well now you have like a 98, 99% blank slate, including in team culture and mentality, which again, I think is even a bigger selling point as well. It's yet another asset in your sale of the team because you're encouraging them to do this, and they probably are going to do it, and then they know that this is a benefit long-term, even short-term, because now you get to literally build a brand new identity for this team, and how it works, its culture and everything, which is such a huge factor in the successes of teams. And also the trust in teams, and thus the ability to sell potential free agents on your team too, no matter how big or small the city is. You see how good this gets? So, cannot reiterate. That has to happen. Everybody's got to go. Full team fire sale for a true rebuild to be able to work. Simple, typical roster rebuild without a massive change through top to bottom of the staff is simply not going to get us anywhere. It's just going to have us doing it with different faces, different names. That's literally it. It's not going to do anything for us. So that has to happen. And again, this could not be the more perfect goddamn time to sell the fucking Blazers, Jody. Just fucking do it. We need an owner that gives a fuck, is a genuine fan, and is actually willing to spend their money too, rather than penny pinch. So obviously balance is good, but it would be great to be able to have one that's also willing to take the risk to go pretty deep into the luxury tax for an attempt at a championship, and obviously give that 2, 3, 4 years, and if that doesn't work, then obviously you try again with a different strategy. It's just the common sense way to do it. I hope that we can finally get that done. Do I think this is going to happen this offseason? In fact, do I think anything I just said that needs to happen is going to happen this offseason? No, I don't. Because I have no trust for this team whatsoever. They've given me nothing but reasons to distrust them. Did I ask your fucking opinion? That's my cue to end. And I was just going to. So, thank you for watching, listening, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.